Part 14. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 138. There was no elevator, no electricity, in the 50-story building, so I had to walk up through the fire escape. Fortunately, there is a big fat guy who can lead the way, so it won't be a hard job. After only about 10 minutes, the big fat man took him to the top of the building. Su Tong took a closer look and saw a middle-aged man sitting on the roof waiting for him. Tables, chairs, food, and drinks were even set up. Only after he crawled out of the fat man's mouth did the middle-aged man look at Su Tong again, and once again cupped his hands towards Su Tong and said, "Please." The two sat down and the man introduced himself. "In this world, my name is Gao Zhou, but in reality my surname is Wu, and my single name is Cao." Surprisingly, when Gao Zhou opened his mouth, he not only announced his family name, but even his real name. This made him stunned for a moment, but he reacted very quickly and immediately said, "My name is I'm fine with Uni, and I'm a descendant of the Shui family in L City." He did not tell his true name or lie in his words. What was more important was to further test the other party's background and see if the other party knew his master's name. After all, according to Mr. Song, his master Shuigui was also a well-known figure back then. Huh. Gao Zhou's fingers trembled slightly when he heard this, and he looked a little surprised and said, "Shuigui is your master?" "Yes." Su Tong nodded solemnly, and Gao Zhou's expression became even more strange as he asked, "Is your master's surname Song?" The name of the master is followed by the character Zhan. Su Tong did not dare to say his full name, so he only reported the character after Song Lao's name. As a result, Gao Zhou's face was full of embarrassment. He didn't know where to put his hands and could only rub his thighs a few times. "That's right, I want to call you Uncle Yu." No wonder he was so embarrassed. He originally wanted to recruit a brother from the 8th sex to be his helper, but ended up recruiting an uncle to him. Sometimes things in this world just don't make sense. It is said that the world is a big place. Some people turn around and spend their whole lives searching for it, but they still can't find it. It is said that the world is small. If you just go to Paris to pee, you might end up peeing on your relatives' shoes if you shake your hands. Although they are not from the same sect, the relationship between the 8 sex is inextricably linked. In the words of the elders, you look down on him and he looks down on you. If no one recognizes the other, where can the 8 sex come from? So in terms of seniority, Su Tong is really his uncle. There is no way, who let Song Lao's age and seniority be put here? Su Tong grinned, seeing his embarrassed look, and said with a smile, "You are Gao Zhou, and I am Uni. It's not like the seniority of senior brother or uncle comes from somewhere in reality. Let's talk about our identities according to the script." Su Tong always liked taking advantage of others, but there was a time, and there was no point in taking advantage of others at this time. When he said this, Gao Zhou felt a lot more relieved. But with this relationship, the two of them are no longer restrained when talking. Don't underestimate the relationship of being from the 8th sect. This is a label for one's own people. Even if everyone's trust is not enough, with this label, many things will be easier to discuss. The two chatted for a while, during which Su Tong did not forget to ask the ranger questions. Gao Zhou grinned and said, "I'm lucky. Some of the prop cards happen to have something in common with the corpse exorcism technique I learned, so I developed the awakening technique Corpse Collector. As long as there is a player's corpse, after my stitching and repair, his corpse can be resurrected for my use. The corpse retains some of its abilities. After the end of the scenario world, an additional 20% will be allocated to the rewards for the tasks he completed. Give me. Is that really a resurrection?" Su Tong's eyes lit up and he was shocked by Gao Zhou's ability. This was simply a magical skill. Whoever brought such a person into the team would be making a huge profit. But Gao Zhou's words dispelled his idea. No, it's not a real resurrection, it's just a collection of corpses. Death is death. How can there be a resurrection? Gao Zhou shook his head, but immediately changed his voice, picked up the chopsticks, took a bite of food and put it into his mouth, pointed at the ranger behind him and said, "But this guy may not be dead. After I took over his body, I found that his body was different from other players' bodies. It felt like it was missing a soul. I guess this guy's body should have activated the props and left long ago. This time it's a script world. Although this kind of special life-saving prop is very expensive, it is not uncommon, but the punishment and price are often difficult to accept." Su Tong nodded. If this was the case, he could still accept Ranger's sacrifice for Zhang Qiang. After the two chatted for a few words, Gao Zhou finally started to bring the topic back to the main topic. "I felt you just now in the longevity shop. You heard the conversation between the pharmacist and me and King Yang Yan." Su Tong raised his glass and took a sip, not denying it but not admitting it either. Seeing this, Gao Zhou slowly put down the chopsticks in his hand and asked tentatively, "I will help you kill Yao Shi and Li Si, and the spoils will be yours, but you have to give me the source virus, and I will hand it over in exchange for 2 strengthening weapons. How about I give you 1 potion?" As the so-called brothers settle accounts, the price is not cheap, but looking at the current situation, it is actually very fair. At least in Gao Zhou's eyes, Su Tong's current situation is not optimistic. A common man is not guilty, but he is guilty of having a jade. He didn't hand over a precious source virus in time, but held it in his hand. Of course, he would become a common man in the eyes of everyone. However, Gao Zhou's proposal was directly rejected by Su Tong. He glanced at the direction shrouded in white fog in the center of the city, and couldn't help but reveal a sinister smile. "I like to do it myself." Gao Zhou's heart moved, and he was startled by Su Tong's understatement, as if the pharmacist and the others were not worth mentioning in Su Tong's eyes. This calm and unhurried feeling made Gao Zhou temporarily unclear about Su Tong's background. At this time, Su Tong suddenly said, "I will give you a strengthening potion, but the premise is that I have to go back alive. After all, that woman is not a fuel-efficient lamp. Let's work together to at least guarantee that we will not suffer." Gao Zhou felt happy when he heard this, but then he immediately came to his senses. "Isn't this the same? Why has it come full circle that I owe you a favor?" After figuring out the joints, Gao Zhou couldn't help but curse the old fox in his heart. It seemed that his uncle was not a fuel-efficient lamp either. The two of them exchanged cups and sat on a high building to drink until the sun was about to set. During this period, Su Tong asked Gao Zhou about Shuigui from the side. Gao Zhou didn't hide it either. He was different from Su Tong. Su Tong became a monk halfway and then entered the script space. Gao Zhou's family is really in the lineage of killing corpses, but most of his unique skills have been lost in his generation. It wasn't until I entered the script world and became a player that I was able to develop my skills. So they know a lot about the older generation. Speaking of Shuigui, Gao Zhou gave a thumbs up and said, "Your master was really like this back then." "I'm not that clear about the specific things. I just heard my dad say it once when he was drunk. He said that he went to Yubaman Mountain alone and killed the traitorous Taoist from San Mao Zhenjun Mansion with one move. The veteran Taoist from the Shangqing sect was killed by him. I was so angry that I vomited blood, but it gave us 8 families a lot of face, but it's a pity that someone seemed to have plotted against me later." Gao Zhou's temper got worse when he talked about the past events mentioned by the older generation. In his opinion, players like them have the blessing of prop cards, but in reality there are some people who do not need prop cards and have extraordinary powers. Su Tong's heart moved, and he thought of his master's hurried away figure, and couldn't help but wonder, "Then do you know what happened in Buman Mountain back then?" "I don't know. I asked about this, but my dad slapped me in the mouth and almost knocked out my molar." Thinking of that slap in the mouth, Gao Zhou subconsciously rubbed his face with his hands. I thought to myself, luckily my mother stopped me, otherwise I would have been beaten severely, so how could I dare to ask about this matter again? That's it? Su Tong was a little disappointed. In fact, he also thought about asking Mr. Song, but he could never find a reason to talk about it. Asking about it out of nowhere would only make the old man suspicious. Even though Mr. Song is old, his heart is like Ming Zheng's. It seems that he needs to spend more time to understand what's going on. The two of them drank several bottles of Wulianjai, but no one turned red after drinking it. After all, they were players, and their physical fitness was increased by the prop card. When they came here, they ate a few brain crystals, and they still drank this little cat urine. Don't get them drunk. Looking at the sun that was about to set in the distance, Su Tong took out a wet wipe and wiped the oil stains on the corners of his mouth and said, "Okay, I'm leaving. Let's talk about the source of the virus slowly when we go back. Are you really sure you can kill Yao Shi and Li Si?" Seeing that Su Tong was about to take action, Gao Zhou asked uneasily. It was not the deep relationship between the two, but the source virus in Su Tong's mouth that he valued. He flicked the ashes on his hand a few times and spit out a mouthful of green smoke. Su Tong's deep eyes were staring at the looming Ferris wheel in the center of the city in front of him. He smiled contemptuously and said, "It's not a big problem." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 139. Whether the problem is big or not, Su Tong knows best. If he is dealing with Song Nuanuan, he may be really afraid. After all, this little girl is in too deep water. What two newcomers? What is silly and sweet? Put her mother's cereal farts in a row. From the first moment I saw this girl, I didn't think she was a good person. But after meeting Yao Shi and Li Si, he could guess their strength level. If the masters in the script world were ranked this time, number 8 is definitely a top player worthy of his name. Following closely behind were the two guys, Gorfiend and Song Nuanuan, who were well hidden and firmly on the front line. At least in his heart, Song Nuanuan was not a good person. Next up were himself, Gao Zhou, the corpse exorcist in front of him, and Liang Hong, who didn't know whether he was alive or dead. The three of them are at the upper level of the second tier. This is not a boast. It is an indisputable fact that his strength has undergone a qualitative change after he obtained the Blood Demon's dark physique. In addition, he also has the ability to thunder and lightning, and has a pair of powerful arms hidden on his back, as well as a fat guardian. Even though his script score is barely above 100, because he sold a brain crystal, in terms of strength, he is only slightly behind Blood Demon. As for Gao Zhou, since he can help him kill Yao Shi and Li Si, he naturally has strong support. Well, Liang Hong, if he had become Yan Niang's subordinate, his strength might be improved a bit. After all, he has the blessing of the source virus. In contrast, the pharmacist, Li Si, and even the dead ranger could only stay at the bottom. Su Tong didn't take the two of them seriously, so the problem wasn't big. The only problem was, they were the mantises, who was the Oriole. Don't forget that there were only 8 players including himself, and where was one more player? This was the key to his decision to cooperate with Gao Zhou. After leaving the building, he called the big fat man back first. At the same time, he took out something from the props book and put it on his face. His whole face suddenly changed into a new look. He took a careful look at the glass door of the building. After a few clicks to make sure there was no problem, he disappeared into the shadows. Goo 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 goo. A wild dog looking for food by the lake accidentally fell into the water of the artificial lake in the square. Suddenly, all the pigeons around were frightened and rushed into the sky with clattering wings. A pair of eyes opened quietly in the darkness, and a faint blue light shone deep in the pupils, making the eyes even more charming and dazzling in the dark night. His eyes scanned the surroundings for clues in the darkness, which reminded him of the owl in the pine forest waiting patiently for his prey to come to him. "Li Si, did you find anything?" The pharmacist's questioning voice came from the headset, and Li Si frowned and responded patiently, "No, I didn't even see an infected person." "Be careful, this is not normal," the pharmacist responded. "To be able to survive until now, they are certainly not so-called rookies. They have noticed something is not right since they entered the city. It is said that even if this place was cleaned by the search team, it is impossible not to see the shadow of an infected person. What's more, there has been a countdown before. It stands to reason that the combat effectiveness of the infected will be improved again after the countdown ends. Why have they been lying in wait for so long? This city is like a dead city. They really haven't even seen an infected person. How is the search team over there?" Li Si asked in a low voice what was going on over there with the pharmacist. One of them occupied the commanding heights, while the other sneaked into the search team to look for traces of Su Tong. "I don't know. The search team is in chaos right now. They encountered something during the day, but no one can tell what it is now. Now everyone is rushing to move supplies. I can't find any trace of that guy. He shouldn't be here. If we hold on for another hour, if the guy doesn't show up, we will retreat." The beast's intuition is always sensitive. The pharmacist felt more and more that something was not right about this place, and he began to retreat in his heart. As he spoke, the pharmacist blended into the crowd, covering his head with a wide hooded hood, and his eyes quickly scanned the surroundings, hoping to find traces of Su Tong as soon as possible. "Quick, quick, quick, there are still 2 hours. Brothers, move as soon as possible. When the 2 hours pass, we will retreat. Then the camp will give us each a big red envelope." On the front of the truck, bright lights illuminated the area as brightly as day. They were lucky. Although they did not find another search team, they unexpectedly discovered a large shopping mall. This shopping mall was obviously just about to open, and there was a banner in front of the door promising a good opening. As a result, before it even opened its doors, it had already ushered in the end of its closure. There is a huge amount of supplies stored inside, and the quantity is simply outrageous. Most of the food has rotted and spoiled, but the cold storage is still running. It turns out that the supermarket is powered by solar cold storage, so even if there is no power in the mall, the cold storage is still running. In addition to the frozen meat inside, there are also a large number of potatoes, pumpkins, onions, and carrots in the warehouse nearby. Captain Jia excitedly stood on top waving the gun in his hand, signaling for everyone to speed up. It's a pity that Yang Yanwang took people to the west. Otherwise, they could carry so many more things in so many cars. Thinking of this, he casually took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, opened it, and the smile on his face immediately faded away. There was only one cigarette inside. After glancing at the boxes of cigarettes in the carriage, Captain Jia hesitated and stuffed the cigarettes back into the cigarette case, planning to reward himself on the way back. Rumble. At this time, it started to rain lightly. A cool breeze blew over, immediately sweeping away the stuffy air. Everyone was working vigorously, covered in stinky sweat. The cool breeze blowing over was like entering the leader's office in the dog days of summer. It was so comfortable. As for the slight drizzle, it can be ignored. A large amount of supplies were stuffed into the truck, some of which could no longer fit, but they still tried their best to stuff it inside. Some people even restarted the abandoned cars on the roadside and used them as temporary transport vehicles. It's already the end of the world anyway, and the traffic police don't care whether you're transporting passengers and goods together, or whether you're transporting goods illegally. Seeing the search team working in full swing, Captain Geo was filled with anticipation. He didn't notice that at some point, wisps of dew began to rise around him. At first, no one took it seriously. It was normal for rain and fog to occur. But after a while, Some people gradually began to realize that something was wrong. Huh. The warehouse in the supermarket was the last place the pharmacist looked for. After confirming that there was no trace of Su Tong, the pharmacist was about to turn around and leave. However, the pharmacist suddenly stopped and turned around to find that a thick layer of fog had begun to appear in the warehouse. Looking sideways to the side, I saw a worker carrying a box of Coke forward. When the figure passed through the haze, I could still see his feet walking underneath, but wait, the person takes 2 more steps. Suddenly, there was no trace of the person, not even a sound was made. Seeing this, the pharmacist's expression suddenly changed, and he hurriedly ran out. While running, he pressed the communicator and shouted to Li Si, what are you doing to eat? A strange haze suddenly surged here. Why didn't you remind me? Sha. There was a rustling sound coming from the communicator, and I couldn't make out what was being said at all. I could vaguely hear Li Si's voice, but if I listened carefully, I couldn't make out a single word. This undoubtedly made the pharmacist even more annoyed, and he was about to speed up and rush out of this hellish place. Suddenly there was a scream from behind, "Run quickly, there is a ghost." A loud roar made many people suddenly come back to their senses, only to find that the thick haze around them had already shrouded them. When they heard this voice again, everyone was instantly furious. Some people may ask, this is the end of the world, are we still afraid of ghosts? If he really turned into a ghost, wouldn't he be able to continue his life in disguise? This is wrong. What people are afraid of is not ghosts but the unknown. The unknown is the scariest thing. The cold voice, coupled with the blinding white mist around them, made everyone feel their scalps numb, their backs as if they were scratched by something, and goosebumps all over their bodies. For a moment, no one cared about moving things and rushed outside like crazy. The entrance and exit of the supermarket is so narrow. As the crowd squeezed in, the troubles became even greater. In fear, everyone didn't even know what was happening. You pulled me, and I pulled you. No one knew who pulled it. They became more and more anxious and careless. I want to rush forward with all my heart. It was at this time that the stampede effect began to appear. The pharmacist was accidentally squeezed in the middle. He felt very angry. He raised his hand and slapped the worker in front of him away. In the blink of an eye, he kicked the worker in front and rushed out after stepping on the person. But just at this moment, the pharmacist suddenly felt a chill behind him, and his subconscious alert made him run away immediately. However, this time he dodged, he was pushed back by the crowd, followed by a stabbing pain in his waist. He looked down and found that a dagger was stuck on his side. Groove. The moment the pharmacist saw the dagger, the first thing he thought of was Su Tong. His face darkened and he cursed loudly, "You bitch, stop pretending and come out." As he spoke, he didn't care whether the crowded workers around him were the targets he was looking for. He pointed his finger and a fluorescent light flashed out, knocking 5 or 6 people in front of him away. At the same time, he quickly pressed the intercom and shouted to Li Si, "There's something wrong with this fog, run away, don't come in." However, what the pharmacist never expected was that another completely different message came from Li Si's phone at this time. "Li Si, come in quickly and help me, hurry up, help me. P.S. It's almost 1,000 monthly tickets. Please give me monthly tickets. Shui is interested in the lottery for the 1,000 monthly tickets." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 140. The fog is getting thicker. When people rushed out of the supermarket, they found that their eyes were misty and they could only barely see the outline of the car. "Run!" I don't know who shouted, and these people scrambled to get on the car. Several people even started to struggle with each other, and the chaos became more and more chaotic. Bang bang bang. Suddenly, a deafening burst of gunfire silenced the scene. Captain Gia stood on the roof of the car. Although his silhouette could not be seen, everyone could hear his voice, "You are crazy. It's just the smog that scares you like this? Who dares to mess up anymore? If you yell nonsense, I will kill him first." Although Captain Gia's curse was unpleasant, it was like a reassurance and made everyone quiet down. "A bunch of rubbish, this scene scares you," Captain Gia scolded and walked back and forth on the roof of the car. "I'm not exaggerating. When I was working in the capital when I was young, if I didn't inhale a few puffs of smog every winter, I'm embarrassed to say that I lived in the capital." Although it was an old joke, the expressions on everyone's faces finally calmed down. Therefore, Captain Gia's ability to sit in this position shows that his professionalism is still excellent. For ordinary people, it is not easy to calm people down so quickly. "Don't panic, our Inspector Yang is also nearby. We will meet up later. By then, all monsters and monsters will be scum." Everyone knows that Inspector Yang is the captain of the special team. Many people have witnessed him easily kill an evolver who looked like a prehistoric giant lizard by himself. After taking this reassurance, everyone's panic disappeared. As a result, everyone calmed down one after another, climbed into the car spontaneously, found a seat and sat down quietly. Captain Gia made a special decision this time. He opened a box of cigarettes and handed them out to everyone, 1 pack of cigarettes per person. Even a few people who were struggling together now had smiles on their faces, giving each other a "hand me one" to say sorry. The pharmacist also got into the car, but just sat in the car. He was sure there must be something wrong with the smog, but he didn't dare to run. There is a saying that goes well, don't stick together when disaster strikes, and don't go alone when encountering ghosts. Under the current situation, he felt that it would be better for him to go with everyone for the time being, but what made him uncomfortable was that UNI must be hiding among these people, maybe hiding somewhere and watching him secretly, or maybe even right there, sitting next to him. This made the pharmacist feel more and more uneasy. He sat there with his eyes rolling, watching the actions of the people around him from time to time. "Oh, isn't this Mr. Medicine?" Suddenly someone recognized the pharmacist and screamed. The fog was too thick and the sky was too dark, and everyone had been busy moving things. Only now did someone see the pharmacist's face clearly, and they couldn't help shouting in surprise. As soon as he heard this, a car full of people rushed over. The reputation of Yao Shi and Li Si was so high in the camp that everyone even believed that they were the heroes who stopped the last virus outbreak. At this moment, it was a time of crisis, and the hero actually appeared beside them. How could they be happy? There was a rush of people rushing over, and the pharmacist's face turned dark at that time. One hand was clenched into a fist, and his heart was in his throat, for fear that Su Tong would take advantage of the chaos and punch him. "I am afraid of going on a killing spree, otherwise I will be very passive if I leave anyone alive." Fortunately, Su Tong did not take action at this time, which finally made the pharmacist secretly relieved. "Mr. Yao, why are you injured?" At this time, the face of the young man sitting next to the pharmacist suddenly changed. His eyes widened and stared at the wound on the pharmacist's lower abdomen, and his hands tremblingly clenched into fists. Then the young man glanced at everyone's faces with red eyes and asked loudly, "Who is it? Who did it?" The young man was so grief-stricken and angry that he wanted to pull out the murderer and peel off his skin. His chest was heaving violently, so that everyone immediately lowered their heads in silence. After all, it was so chaotic just now, and no one could tell who did it. Not to the point of. The pharmacist pulled the young man guiltily and signaled him not to be so loud. His injury looked serious, but in fact it was not broken. Hearing the words, the young man opened his mouth, but in the end he lowered his head and silently got into the car to rummage around. After a while, he crawled back again with a medical kit in his hand. "Mr. Medicine, let me do it." The pharmacist glanced at the medicine box warily, fearing that there might be something like a bomb inside. When he was about to refuse sternly, the young man was already squatting in front of him. "Last time the virus broke out, my dad, in short, you saved him, and you saved me. If it weren't for you, my sister and I would all have died. I don't know how to repay you, but as long as you have, if necessary, I will be happy even if you ask me to die." Faced with such a sincere confession, the pharmacist felt a little embarrassed for the first time. He did not refuse the young man and asked him to bandage his wounds. However, the pharmacist did not dare to be careless during the whole process. His face was as if nothing had happened, but he glanced at him from time to time to make sure that this kid was not playing any tricks. The young man's bandaging technique is very skillful and simple, but every detail is handled neatly. This made the pharmacist a little surprised, a place to study medicine. The young man nodded shyly, and the pharmacist continued with a clear look, "Surgical place." The young man was stunned for a moment, looked at everyone around him with a blush, and said in a buzzing voice like a fly, "Gynecology department." Now everyone looked embarrassed. "Haha, it's the same." The pharmacist laughed awkwardly, but there was always an indescribable twist in his heart. Fortunately, this embarrassment did not last long, and soon the car in front slowly stopped. Everyone stuck their heads out, trying to see clearly what was happening in front of them. I saw that the mist in front of me was getting thicker and thicker, and I couldn't even see the road clearly. Even if there were fog lights shining on it, it was completely white, as if there was a wall in front of me. It was impossible to see anything from a distance of more than 1 meter. It doesn't work. In this case, even a veteran driver with more than 10 years of driving experience would not dare to drive forward. This is completely a blind man trying to find the road. If he is not careful, even the person and the car may be in trouble. Upon seeing this, Captain Geo picked up the walkie-talkie and called Supervisor Yang and others several times, but there was no reply. It may be that the water mist obscured the signal, or it may be that they went in a wrong direction and exceeded the communication range. What should we do? Should we just wait here until the fog clears? Someone suggested resting here until the haze clears tomorrow before setting off again. This was a sound idea, and everyone else looked at Captain Jia. It was obvious that every word he said at this moment represented everyone's expectations. After Captain Jia hesitated for a while, he shook his head. "No, we have to find a way to leave as soon as possible." The reason why he said this was because before setting off, they received a temporary mission from above to find the whereabouts of the search team in front. He had read the report at the time, which showed that the first team was able to contact them after entering. But as time goes by, it seems that the voice of each contact becomes smaller and smaller, until finally the contact is completely interrupted, and the last sentence is only 5 words, "We are lost." Perhaps out of professional sensitivity, Captain Jia always felt that there was something wrong with this sentence, and their current situation at this moment seemed to be very similar to the situation encountered by the previous search team. All kinds of uneasiness surrounded his heart, making him want to leave here as soon as possible. But Captain Jia's words inevitably made many people feel conflicted. They felt that Captain Jia was simply unreasonable. Why should we continue walking when the road conditions in front of us were already like this? If they are not careful, they may not die in the mouths of those infected, but in traffic accidents. That is really a great irony. "Captain, I really can't see the road clearly today. What's the difference between driving with my eyes closed? Isn't this looking for death?" The driver was also trying to persuade others, and others also gave suggestions, but Captain Jia was determined to leave. He couldn't explain to everyone. After all, he had just calmed down. if he continued to talk nonsense for no reason. Such nonsense may lead to even greater trouble. The noise below was getting louder and louder, which made Captain Jia more and more upset and angry. Until now, he suddenly understood why his immediate superiors, such as Yang Yanwang, sometimes made choices that were difficult for their subordinates to understand. But he never explains his actions. After all, you sit in a different position and see different things, but unfortunately all this information cannot be shared. After Captain Jia had this understanding, he simply gritted his teeth, raised his gun and pointed it at the sky. The deafening sound of gunshots immediately silenced everyone. Captain Jia glanced at the drivers with a cold face and displeased eyes. Even if we push forward 1 meter at a time, we still have to leave this hellish place. After that, he pointed to a few people, tie ropes, form a group of 5, hold a flashlight and go ahead to clear the way. Let's grope our way forward. I don't believe we can't get out. Captain Jia's method is for each of the 5 people to tie a rope and tie the end of the rope to the front of the car. Each person walks in a different direction. After the person walking in front figures out the route, the car can follow the direction of the rope. Although the method is a bit clumsy, it is still a good one. Soon the 5 people tied the rope quickly and began to walk slowly forward. After about 10 minutes passed, 4 people turned back one after another. When I asked, I found out that they had walked in a big circle and turned back to where they were. Trash, Captain Jia cursed secretly and looked at the last rope. As time went by, the rope gradually became straighter. Captain Jia stood at the front of the car and watched with wide eyes. At this time, after the intercom made a rustling sound for a while, he heard Zhang Peng's voice walking in front. The voice came from the intercom. Found the exit. After hearing this, everyone cheered for a moment, and Captain Jia also breathed a sigh of relief. He waved his hand and signaled the driver to follow the rope and drive forward. As the car moved forward slowly, I didn't know how long it had been driving, but I vaguely saw a person standing in front of me. It should be Zhang Peng. He waved his hand to signal the car to move forward, and his voice came from the intercom, hurry up, drive forward boldly. The driver became a little impatient at his urging, and just as he was about to step on the accelerator and drive forward, Captain Dijia, who was standing at the head, suddenly saw something, and his pupils suddenly tightened. Stop! Squeak! There was a sharp sound of braking, and everyone froze, and some almost rolled off the roof of the car. Suddenly there was a burst of cursing greetings, all of which were greeting the driver's 18th generation ancestors. But neither Captain Jia nor the driver was in the mood to pay attention to the shouts and curses. The two of them stared blankly at the broken bridge more than 10 meters deep in front of them. Their faces turned the color of pig liver, and cold sweat ran down their foreheads. Just rolled down. I saw a section of the rope falling to the bottom of the bridge. What was even weirder was that Zhang Peng's shouts came from the intercom from time to time. Come down quickly, hurry up, it's so cold down there, come and stay with me. Oops, my work schedule is a complete mess. Let's go and do some more coding. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 141. There is no road, the bridge is broken, and the darkness under the bridge is at least 10 meters deep. If Captain Jia hadn't just seen the warning sign for the Duan Tokiao on the roadside, I'm afraid even the person and the car would have fallen down at this time. Listening to Zhang Peng's shouting on the intercom, both the driver and Captain Jia's scalps were numb. After a moment, Captain Jia suddenly grabbed the walkie-talkie and said, "Thief son, you are a human or a ghost, get out." Captain Jia cursed, and the intercom was silent for a long time. After a moment, a signal interference was heard, and then the voice of King Yang Yan came, "Captain Jia, where are you? Come and meet us." Captain Jia, who was about to start scolding again, was stunned for a moment when he heard the familiar voice. He was about to speak, but hesitated for a moment before asking, "Inspector Yang? Is it really you?" "Nonsense, of course it's me. What happened to you taking the wrong medicine? I'll send you a flare. When you see the direction of the flare, gather over to me as soon as possible. We can only wait for you for 15 minutes. The familiar sound of cursing made Captain Geo feel relieved immediately. Squeak boom. A bright red flare exploded in the sky, and the red fire instantly dyed the white mist with a red glow. Fortunately, the distance is not very far. Captain Geo made a visual inspection and felt confident, but he soon realized that 15 minutes was too short. It would take half an hour to transfer so much material, no matter how fast or short it was. After a brief moment of hesitation, he gritted his teeth and said, "Everyone, give up the supplies. Take as much as you can carry. We will set off in 1 minute." "What?" After everyone heard Captain Geo's words, their expressions suddenly changed. How could the supplies they had worked so hard to bring be abandoned so easily? But Captain Geo didn't discuss it with them at all this time. "Listen clearly, we will set off in 1 minute and give up all supplies. If you can't do it, you can stay here by yourself." Being given 1 minute was an order he issued under great pressure. From a visual inspection, running from here for 15 minutes is still very tense. Someone will definitely fall behind, but at this moment, Captain Geo can't care so much. The scene that just happened was so weird that people and the car almost fell off. If they stayed in this ghost place any longer, they would definitely die. "Move." The pharmacist sitting in the car behind stood up and urged everyone to leave quickly. He didn't know what was happening in front of him, but he always felt that there was a strange feeling in this place. The young man on the side stretched out his hand to help him, but the pharmacist dodged him without leaving a trace, and said with a smile, "Don't worry, this little injury won't trouble me." As he spoke, he became even more vigilant. At this time, he became more worried that Su Tong, who was hiding around, would take the opportunity to attack him. Even he couldn't believe the young man in front of him. When the young man saw this, he didn't force himself. He quickly jumped out of the car with everyone. Seeing some people scrambling to carry supplies, the young man hesitated for a long time, gritted his teeth and rushed in. However, he just took some medicine, jumped out of the car in a hurry, and hurriedly caught up with the pharmacist and said, "Mr. Medicine, please take these medicines. In case the wound becomes infected, these are life-saving medicines." The pharmacist sneered in his heart. He calls himself a pharmacist, but he still lacks this little medicine? But seeing the sincere look on this kid's face, he didn't refuse. He nodded and said, "In that case, let's go together." As he spoke, he quickened his pace and walked toward the location illuminated by the flare without looking back. Even though the pace was not fast, each step seemed to be taking 5 or 6 meters, pulling the young man behind him early in the morning. He lifted up his clothes, looked at the bandaged wound, smiled disdainfully, tore off the bandaged gauze and threw it away. "Then take some white powder and apply it on it. The powder is very magical. Once it touches the skin, it will immediately start to grow and heal quickly." Watching the wound gradually heal, I feel completely relieved and muttered, "No matter where you are hiding, if you want to trick me, there is no way." As he spoke, he walked forward quickly, but before he could walk a few steps, the pharmacist's face suddenly turned red and hot, and an indescribable feeling came over him. It's as if he has suddenly become more than 10 years younger. He walks with great speed, and his whole body is full of blood. Even his third leg wants to jump out and show off his muscles for you. What happened? The pharmacist became more and more confused, and his whole body felt unbearably hot, but there was still a kind of ecstasy that kept hitting his mind. Hiss ah! He spread his hands and involuntarily let out a low moan from his mouth, and even the world in front of him became blurry and distorted. No. This. The pharmacist immediately realized that this ecstatic feeling was very similar to the strong hallucination caused by taking drugs, but even if he realized it, people would always want to get addicted to it. This is like when you pass by a May's hair salon and see a beautiful young lady standing in front of the door, holding a lollipop in her mouth and looking at you with charming eyes. You know in your heart that this is wrong. My noble soul does not allow myself to fall like this. But when I felt it, I immediately changed my mind. Perhaps it is because of my noble soul that I need to save these young ladies. If I don't go to hell, who will? At this time, the pharmacist's mind began to shift toward the latter. The strong hallucinogenic effect came down, and the pharmacist felt that he was starting to feel as if he were in a fairyland. The whispers in his ears that he had never heard clearly became clearer and clearer, and the sneaky whispers poured into his mind as if they had some powerful magic power. The flesh under his ribs began to crack, like two greedy mouths licking the human scent in the air. Mr. Medicine. In a daze, the pharmacist heard someone calling him from behind. He turned his hazy eyes, but what he saw was twisted like a twist. Captain Gia saw that the pharmacist's face was not normal, and was about to step forward to ask him what was going on. Suddenly a green light appeared in the pharmacist's eyes, and his palm suddenly stretched like a wild python, and he grabbed Captain Gia and others. People. A soldier was unable to dodge and was immediately entangled by this arm. Before Captain Gia and the others came to their senses, they saw countless mouths split open on his arms, and they began to eat at him. The sound of kick 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 echoed under the night sky, but in the blink of an eye, the soldier was devoured into a pile of broken bones and rotten flesh. Hiss. Captain Gia and the others were all dumbfounded at this moment. The pharmacist's eyes were flashing with green light, and his glance made everyone's scalp tingle. He is infected. Upon seeing this, a soldier decisively raised the muzzle of his gun, pointed it at the pharmacist and pulled the trigger. Bang 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 bang. A dazzling tongue of fire erupted from the black hole of the gun, but the figure of the pharmacist was like a ghost. The figure kept moving left and right, and even activated the skill of the prop card, opening his palm and splashing a ball of light yellow powder. The soldiers stained with the powder immediately felt as if their flesh had been burned by fire, and they fell to the ground and screamed. Damn it! Seeing that the situation was beyond his control, Captain Gia's expression changed drastically. He quickly took out his walkie-talkie and asked Yang Yan Wang and others for support. At the same time, he raised his gun and aimed at the pharmacist and fired. An antibacterial bullet hit the pharmacist. It was not known whether it was because this special bullet had a strong inhibitory effect on viruses. The pharmacist suddenly regained consciousness, and the person gradually woke up from the hallucination, his mind buzzing for a few times. When he opened his eyelids again, he realized that the corpses of 5 or 6 people were lying at his feet. Everyone, including Captain Xia, pointed their guns at him. "You, what are you doing?" The pharmacist, who hadn't realized what was happening, suddenly looked strange. He is the hero of the camp, how could they point guns at him like this? Looking around, I saw that everyone's face was full of fear and hatred for him, and some were puzzled and shocked. Shot. Captain Gia didn't care what the pharmacist was thinking at the moment. Seeing that he didn't move, he immediately pulled the trigger decisively. In an instant, bullets came like a torrential rain. The pharmacist was also awakened by the gunfire. He roared, fell sideways to the ground to avoid the bullets, and cursed, "You are crazy. It's me, I'm the pharmacist." No one paid attention to his shouts, and bullets were chasing after him crazily. Seeing that there was no explanation, the pharmacist's heart sank, and there was a killing intent in his eyes. "I tried my best to save you, but you actually want to kill me." This thought flashed through my mind, but it was filled with turbulent murderous intent. After a moment, the pharmacist decisively activated the ability of the prop card. With a wave of his hand, Countless medicinal powders of various colors were sprinkled into the air. At the same time, he opened his mouth and blew, and a strong wind suddenly surged in the air, forming wind blades visible to the naked eye. These wind blades were already powerful, but after being mixed with these poisonous powders, they even sealed their throats with blood. If you touch it, you will die. If you touch it, you will die. Fortunately, those experienced soldiers escaped in time, but the ordinary people who caught up behind suffered a sudden disaster. They were chopped to pieces by the wind blade in a short time. After being contaminated with poisonous powder, the corpses rotted rapidly. And it emits pungent poisonous smoke. For a time, there was an endless stream of screams and wails. Now the pharmacist panicked and secretly regretted it, wondering why he had become so impulsive. If it could be explained by misunderstanding before, now I can't explain it clearly even if I'm full of words. Just as he was dazed, a bright light suddenly shone from behind him, shining directly on him, followed by a strong wind. It was Inspector Yang who hurried over after hearing the gunfire. He was originally waiting for Captain Jia and the others, but he heard fierce gunshots and cries for help. After discovering that the two were not far away, he simply led people over. As soon as they arrived, they saw the pharmacist slaughtering Captain Jia and others. They were surprised and even more elated. Their heroic image was shattered. No, it's not what you think, it's not. The pharmacist's heart sank, but he didn't know how to explain it. Devil, kill him, kill him. Seeing the relatives and friends lying on the ground, their deaths were horrific, and everyone was filled with grief and anger. They glared at the pharmacist and wanted to peel him off. Not me. The call of attack came, and the pharmacist had a hard time defending his words, and felt an unspeakable coldness in his heart. He was obviously the hero of the camp. If it weren't for him, the camp would have been destroyed long ago. Why, didn't you just accidentally kill a few people? Am I also trying to protect myself? Why, has he become the devil you call him? Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 142. Warning, your behavior has seriously violated the rules of the camp, and all your reputation in the camp will be cleared. Warning, your actions have caused great damage to the camp, and your subsequent missions will also change accordingly. Please pay attention to the mission prompts. The cold warning sound came, like a harsh judgment, hitting his heart hard. The pharmacist never imagined that it would have such a result. No. I don't accept it. Every time you perform a mission, how many people don't die? Every time you fight an infected person, why don't you kill a few people who run away from the battle? I just accidentally killed a few people, and they shot me with a gun. I was forced to fight back before killing them. Does this mean that all his previous achievements will be erased? The pharmacist was full of grievances and anger, even though he was not protecting the camp out of his own heart, but because of his mission and the role he played. But all that hard work and dedication can never be fake. Unexpectedly, there would be such a result, such a sharp contrast, which made the pharmacist unable to accept it in his heart. If the pharmacist could calm down and think carefully at this time, it would not be difficult to understand where the problem lies. When a good person does a bad thing, he or she will be criticized by many people, while when a bad person does a good thing, he or she will be praised by many people. Many people don't understand why this is the case. In fact, the reason is very simple. If you give candy to a person every day, if you don't give it to him one day, he will hate you. If you beat someone every day, if you don't beat him one day, he will be grateful to you. This is the psychological reaction brought about by the accumulation of quantity. This is exactly what our ancestors often said: rice rises and kindness fights rice and hatred. This principle is very simple. How can people see it clearly in the game? The name Yang Yanwang was not just blown away. Seeing the pharmacist's demeanor becoming more and more manic, he frowned and suddenly stretched out his hand towards the pharmacist. The 5 fingers were already bent like eagle claws, sweeping across with a faint golden light. Seeing this, the pharmacist's face turned cold, and he waved his hand to sprinkle a large amount of powder in front of him. But how could the name Yang Yama be blown out? He ignored the medicine powder scattered on his body, grabbed his chest, and tore the medicine man's chest clothes into many pieces, and the skin and flesh on his chest were also torn with a deep scar. Just when the pharmacist was about to fight back, he realized that Yang Yan Wang had already taken a step forward, and this step happened to be pinned on the pharmacist's leg. At the same time, the other hand grasped the pharmacist's shoulder, and a great force was directly transmitted to it. The concussive force then erupted, causing all the muscles and bones in the pharmacist's body to tremble and lose strength. This is the authentic Shaolin Liuhe boxing. Yang Yan Wang studied martial arts in Shaolin since he was a child. Later, he went out to work in the mountains and made a name for himself early with his skills. And after encountering the Doomsday, he was lucky enough to get a mutant brain crystal. After eating it, not only did his strength greatly increase, but he also had a unique supernatural fluid golden light. The medicinal powder that the pharmacist spilled on him was directly turned into ashes and dispersed after being contaminated by this golden light. His strength, like a tiger's wings, gave him the reputation of being the king of hell. I know that people like you can be a hero but also a disaster. Yang Yan Wang sneered, raised his wrist, lifted the pharmacist's elbow, and shook him up. Immediately, the pharmacist's eyes blurred, like a poisonous snake being lifted up by its tail and shaken. Unexpectedly, he was involuntarily thrown around in a semicircle by King Yang of Hell and was thrown to the ground, and he lost all ability to resist. Seeing this, King Yang Yan took advantage of the situation and took a step forward. He continued to hold his right hand into a claw shape and grabbed it horizontally. The pharmacist was about to fight back. But he was horrified to find that he had lost control of his body again, and continued to be forcibly dragged, staggering backwards in the opposite direction involuntarily. The pharmacist now began to regret that he should not have had a close fight with King Yang Yan. So much so that now I am completely powerless against this guy's continuous attacks, but where is the regret medicine for sale in the world? But he is not just waiting to be killed. Seeing that if he continues to be passive, his life will be at stake here. Gritting his teeth, it's all because of you. As he spoke, the pharmacist's body suddenly swelled, and his rapidly enlarged body was like expanded shrimp chips thrown into a frying pan. At the same time, his flesh opened and his mouth opened, and vicious curses came out of his mouth. All of them will die. All of them will die. You are the ones who forced me to do this. Various medicinal powders were thrown out by him, and at the same time, these big mouths were sucked in suddenly, and the strong wind suddenly turned the surrounding 10 meters into a short vacuum, including the medicinal powders that were also sucked into his mouth. After inhaling these medicinal powders, the pharmacist's body further swelled, and you could see a stream of colored air erupting from his ear holes or nasal cavity from time to time. With this appearance, those who didn't know better thought it was a replica of Big Fat Self-Destruction. In fact, it's almost the same, except that the pharmacist will not choose to self-destruct easily. As long as you buy him some time, he can activate the prop card and forcefully escape from this script world. Go to hell, Poison Explosive Star. A big mouth suddenly opened, and countless wind blades burst out in an instant. It was like a flood of river water covering the sky in an instant. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was an all-round attack. Oops, run away. King Yang's face changed drastically, and he stood in front of everyone, shouting for everyone to leave quickly, but was it too late? Call. In an instant, the poisonous wind blade was mixed, and in an instant it cut the surrounding woods into flat ground. Some unlucky ones were struck by the wind blade in an instant, split in half on the spot, and the body rotted rapidly. By the time the body fell to the ground, it had been corroded by the poison into white bones, and there was still a puff of green smoke. When Captain Jia saw that he could not escape, suddenly a big hand grabbed his arm and pulled him over. When Captain Jia came back to his senses, he realized that there was a huge paper man standing in front of him. The paper man's arms were crossed, but his fingers were countless slender tentacles. These tentacles were intertwined to form an arc-shaped wall. These wind blades were turned back before they even touched them. What's this? While Captain Jia was surprised, King Yang Yan had no choice but to take the initiative to attack. Even his fluid golden light began to be unable to withstand the blows of wave after wave of wind blades. I saw his hands like knives, chopping on the wind blade. Under the shining light, he fully displayed the crane style in Liu He fist, like a flying crane flying up against the sky. This elegance and calmness, even it gives people the illusion of a majestic atmosphere and a crane spreading its wings. Almost in an instant, he avoided the attack of the wind blade in front of him. The uppercut hit the pharmacist hard on the chin. When he was in pain, he turned over, stepped on the pharmacist's forehead, and jumped behind the pharmacist. He grabbed his shoulders with both hands, bumped his waist with his knees, and then jumped up, actually pulling him up in the air, and then slammed him to the ground. Boom! Under the huge impact, the pharmacist's eyes immediately turned white, blood spurted out from his mouth, and his entire spine was broken. What was even worse was that under the big hands of King Yang Yama, he twisted hard, and a burst of energy erupted from his arms. There was an explosion of broken bones, and white bone residue pierced out. This is not the Liu He fist, but the unique trick created by King Yang Yan Flying Star Fall. This move seems to be majestic, but it is extremely damaging. People who are attacked by this move often have few bones in their bodies that are intact. Even if he survives, he will only be a waste. The pharmacist let out a scream just as King Yang Hel was about to put an end to his pain. Squeak! A brilliant blue light suddenly flashed in the air, and an arrow was seen striking through the air, pointing directly at King Yang of Hell. You can see that the wooden shaft on the arrow was wrapped in a layer of light blue flames after it flew out, leaving little sparks in the air, like the tail of a meteor streaking across the sky, and the leading edge flashed. The blue fire is exactly the three-sided arrow. With such an iconic attack, it was easy to figure out that it was Li Si. He had actually been rushing over for a while, and had been hesitant to take action. It was only now that he couldn't help but decide to help. Idiot, who told you to come in? When he realized it was Li Si, the pharmacist suddenly yelled helplessly. He had been shouting at Li Si not to come in. Why did this idiot come in? Even if he comes in, he shouldn't attack King Yang of Hell here. He may not be able to save himself, and even he will be dragged down and become a traitor in the camp from then on. But Li Si didn't care about this. Although they were not teammates, the two had cooperated as early as the first script world, and they would occasionally chat at the exhibition. Even if we don't meet often, it is already a precious friendship for players who are precarious and whose lifespan can only be calculated by the number of scenarios. Some people say that the script world is only about gains and losses, so today Li Si wanted to give it a try and be stupid to see if he could rescue this old friend. Realizing the terrible damage caused by this arrow, Yang Yan Wang actually did not dodge. He put his arms across his chest, and his body was covered with golden light. Suddenly, his strong body stood upright like a rock standing still in the storm. Boom! The arrow hit Yang Yan Wang's chest, and a billowing wave of air suddenly flew up. At this moment, Li Si flew out from the darkness and grabbed the pharmacist on the ground. But just when his hand was about to touch the pharmacist's body, the surrounding air suddenly surged in one direction. Li Si's expression changed. He raised his head and saw a huge iron fist slowly raised, driving the surrounding airflow surge towards him. Get out of the way! The pharmacist screamed, but it was too late. Even though Li Si tried to parry, the punch still deformed his left hand as quickly as a broken chopstick. The body flew out like a cannonball. Seeing this, Yang Yanwang strode after him, intending to take the opportunity to kill Li Si as well. Run quickly. Don't look back, run quickly. The pharmacist was still trying his best to clamp one of Yang Yanwang's feet with his legs, hoping to delay Li Si for a while, but he was kicked out mercilessly. Under the severe pain, he couldn't even activate the life-saving props that had been prepared for a long time were suddenly filled with darkness, and they were so painful that they even breathed away. At this moment, a hand suddenly caught his body from behind. "Mr. Yao, wake up quickly, wake up quickly." In a daze, he opened his eyelids and frowned for a moment as he looked at the young man's face. Just when he was about to say something, he suddenly straightened up and a dagger penetrated his chest from his back. Seeing the smile on the young man's face become more sinister, "I didn't expect that what Yan Niang said is true. Eating a large amount of brain crystals will really cause big problems." A familiar voice came, making the pharmacist's eyes widen in horror, and he screamed, "It's you." The young man reached out and tore his face a few times, and then he actually tore open a human skin mask, revealing the face he had been looking for. It was none other than Su Tong himself. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 143. Yes, the pharmacist really didn't expect that this young man was actually Su Tong himself. He stared blankly and noticed the human skin mask in his hand. His expression suddenly became relieved. The Jack mask, a prop that can only be used about 5 times, is not unusual at the show. The reason Su Tong bought this prop at the exhibition was originally to enter the hospital and rescue his good gay friend. But at this time, he was used in this place. This mask is a special consumable prop such as medicine, so it is not within the ceiling range of the prop card, and naturally does not require a mission to unlock it. This can be considered an advantage. But it doesn't work as well as you think. After all, it's just a mask, it doesn't really make you become another person. Even if you observe carefully enough, you can see enough flaws in the details. But unfortunately, Su Tong's perfect acting skills made up for this flaw. In addition, it was dark at night and there was mist all around, which further enhanced the concealment of the mask. It's not surprising that the pharmacist didn't notice it for a while. My wound. He suddenly remembered that the reason why he lost control was probably because of this guy. This is really not me. Su Tong shook his head. He had indeed tampered with the wound, but quietly stuffed a biomixed product under the skin of the wound. That thing is very small and generally difficult to detect. This was originally a backup trick, because the mixture was wrapped with a thin cotton thread. Only when the gauze was torn off, the mixture would be cut open by the sharp cotton thread and quickly enter the pharmacist's body. There is no need to explain how amazingly powerful these little mixtures are. Just look at the way Liang Hong was so depressed by it, and he looked like he was giving up on himself. You can tell how powerful this thing is in hallucinating. It turned out that the pharmacist was more vigilant than he thought. After shaking him off, he pulled off the gauze, causing the mixture to be immediately chopped up by the cotton thread and mixed into his body. But if that was all, it wouldn't be a big problem. However, Yao Shi and the others hunted many evolvers along the way and obtained many kinds of brain crystals. If the quality is poor, just throw it to the soldiers aside to improve their combat effectiveness. As for the ones with good quality and good appearance, he and Li Si would divide them half and half between you and me. The two of them didn't have Yan Niang's guidance, and the types of brain crystals they ate were also messy. It would be strange if there were no problems. This was the source of the auditory hallucinations that always appeared in his ears during this period. As a result, The hallucinogenic effect brought by the mixture immediately tore apart the defenses of his mind, causing him to lose control. Su Tong didn't have a chance to speak to the pharmacist. After the knife was pulled out of his chest, he quickly stabbed him in the heart again. The pharmacist waved his hand feebly and held Su Tong's wrist tightly with his palm, as if he wanted to say something. He still didn't say the last sentence, and his hand fell to the ground weakly. The pharmacist's prop book appeared on his body. Su Tong opened the prop book and looked through it. There were many prop cards in the pharmacist's prop book. After careful inspection, he found that the pharmacist's combat effectiveness was actually very poor, and even the ranger might not be able to compare with it. But this guy has many prop cards for making drugs, which are treasures. Any treatment medicine at the exhibition can be described as priceless. No wonder the pharmacist is never stingy every time he adds money. If it were another time, he might be attracted by these prop cards for making drugs, but looking at it now, he couldn't help it. At this time, he suddenly saw a prop card, and his eyes stayed on this prop card for 10 seconds. An appointment at the end of the road. Special props, after activation, can force you to leave the script world, but you must bear the corresponding price. If you are forced to leave the scenario world, your income in the scenario world will be 0, and you will immediately suffer an escape penalty in the next scenario world. Note, it takes 5 minutes to activate this prop. You must not move or be interrupted within 5 minutes, otherwise it will fail. Although I have heard of this prop more than once. But this is the first time I have actually seen such a prop card. Although they are all used to save lives, there are various types of prop cards, and each type has a different punishment mechanism. Some are lighter, some are heavier. The nuances are all strange, and he has even heard of some malicious props that will even give you a special boosting effect, such as turning your sniper rifle into a Gatling. Or it may make you unable to tell any lies in the entire script world. There are even more extreme ones, such as your sense of taste being disturbed and everything you eat tastes like eating feces, etc. These punishments are not fatal, but they are not fatal to everyone. Want to meet? Su Tong just glanced at it hastily, looked at it with a little interest, and then couldn't show any interest at all. It is no exaggeration to say that a total of 670 points can be considered a huge sum of money if he chooses all the pharmacist points. This amount of money is not much less than Zhang Hu's script points. The inventory of so many script points is really surprising. But if you think about it carefully, you will feel relieved. The pharmacist's prop card abilities are all biased towards pharmaceuticals. Just relying on these therapeutic drugs can sell a lot of money. In addition, along the way, they mostly used supernatural powers to fight and rarely stimulated the power of prop cards, so the prop points were naturally accumulated. No wonder Li Si is so obedient. He is such a good financial sponsor. He can't be found even with a lantern. Su Tong sighed to himself, reached out and touched the pharmacist and closed his eyelids. Then he summoned Big Fatty and quickly chased Li Si and Yang Yan Wang. The two of them were fighting fiercely, and they were walking deep into the mist. Li Si always looked at the longbow in his hand, but today when he met Yang Yan Wang himself, he realized what it means to be unable to eat a tiger after eating a turtle. Feel. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. 3 arrows shot through the air in a row. Yang Yan Wang made a backhand move, and his fists were opened and closed. His fists and palms alternated between tigers and dragons. He brought the essence of Liu Hequan to its extreme, and easily blocked the attack in front of him. Arrow gleam. Damn it! Seeing this, Li Si secretly cursed in his heart, turned around and accelerated to throw away King Yang Yan. This was also what made Yang Yan Wang helpless. He could block the arrows but could not catch up with Li Si. He could only be kited by him and became increasingly angry. The two of them were running quickly, one behind the other, when suddenly a strange gate appeared in front of them in the mist. Li Si took a closer look and saw that it was actually a playground. Thinking about it carefully, they saw this amusement park from a distance last time they passed by, but they didn't expect to end up here. That's fine. This is a good place to kill someone. He will never come back. Li Si was thinking secretly, wanting to take advantage of the complex terrain of the amusement park to snipe King Yang Yan. But when he just stepped through the door, a gust of cool wind blew in my face, blowing the wind chimes on the side, making a crisp sound of tinkling bells. Li Si's raised foot collapsed forward, and as the foot hanging in mid-air slowly fell down. His feet were actually in the air, as if he had missed the step. He was startled, and subconsciously tried to jump up with his back feet. As a result, with this jump, a strong sense of suffocation suddenly came over him, as if a rope was tied around his body. On the throat. As the rope tightened, Li Si's eyes suddenly widened, and he struggled to scratch his neck with both hands. On the fair skin of his neck, a trace of hemp rope became clearer and clearer. It was so clear that you could even see the texture of the rope on the skin. But the strange thing was that you could only see the trace of the rope, but not the rope. No matter how hard Li Si grabbed and scratched, he couldn't touch anything at all. The rope became tighter and tighter, and his legs kept struggling in the air. Until a moment later, a wisp of yellow water spilled down the pants leg, and the struggling feet hung feebly in the air. Huh! At this time, King Yang Yan suddenly stopped walking, and the aura of Li Si that he had been tracking suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if the trace was cut off in an instant. This made King Yang of Hell very confused. Although he is not as fast as Li Si, he has a special tracking ability. Unless the target he targets is dead, no one can escape his pursuit as long as it is within a radius of 50 miles. Is he dead? Yang Yan Wang thought for a while and felt that this was simply ridiculous. After fighting Li Si several times, he found that this guy's close combat ability was not strong, but he was not weak either, and he was very sensitive to changes in his surroundings. Generally speaking, it is not that easy to kill a master like him. At least like myself, it is simply impossible to kill him in an instant. Just when Yang Yan Wang was suspicious, suddenly the walkie-talkie on his shoulder made a rustling sound. After a while, the sound disappeared, replaced by a hoarse cry for help. "There is someone, help me, please help me." "Who?" He hurriedly picked up the walkie-talkie, and after a while he heard a man's excited cry for help from the walkie-talkie. I am Chen Yanbo, a member of the search team, come and save me, help me." Chen Yanbo. Yang Yan Wang raised his eyebrows slightly and asked tentatively, "Who is your captain?" "Song Kidong, Captain Song." Hearing this name, Yang Yan Wang's heart moved, and he finally confirmed that the person asking for help was the first search team he was looking for. So he quickly asked about their location. "Where are you?" "We are trapped in an amusement park. I don't know what exactly happened. We have been trapped here for a long time." Chen Yanbo's voice was particularly excited, and he shouted for help, hoping that King Yang of Hell would come to rescue them as soon as possible. Playground. Yang Yan Wang glanced sideways and saw that 5 or 6 meters in front of him, wasn't it the gate of the amusement park? A huge dog head with a huge mouth and a funny face in the mist looked a bit strange and inexplicable. Yang Yan Wang did not move forward, but just stood at the door and looked around. He saw that the amusement park was empty and everything was covered by white mist. At most, you can only see the swing hanging on the crooked old tree behind the garden gate, shaking slightly. "Where are you? Why can't I see you?" Yang Yan Wang suddenly became suspicious, picked up the walkie-talkie and asked. Swish swish. Rustle. The noise in the walkie-talkie became stronger and stronger, as if there was some strong interference. It took about 5 or 6 seconds before I heard a complete sentence coming from the intercom. "Hey, we are up there, look up." Yang Yan Wang was startled, and slowly raised his head to take a look. His eyes suddenly widened. He saw corpses hanging on the Ferris wheel in front of him. As the Ferris wheel slowly rotated, these corpses also then it rose and fell. He didn't know if it was because he was dazzled or it was his illusion, but he actually saw these corpses, smiling at him. I stayed up all night last night. I thought I would sleep well, but then I heard that my mother-in-law came to see me at noon, with a chicken in her left hand and a duck in her right hand. Hey, just stay up for a while, and you will be able to overcome the hardships again. It was not easy at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. After sending my mother-in-law away, I fell asleep at the end, but when I opened my eyes, I realized that I had slept until 4 in the morning. Ha 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 ha, I got up. 8, coded. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 144. Yang Yanwang's original name is Yangkang, which is indeed the same name as Yangkang in Jin Yang's novels. He made a lot of jokes since he was a child, so he decided to go to the Shaolin Temple to practice martial arts. His Liuhe boxing was already superb. In the apocalypse, with the blessing of a large number of brain crystals, he became even more powerful, and was called the King of Hell by everyone. However, when this living King of Hell really reached the gate of Hell with one foot, he couldn't help but be frightened and broke into a cold sweat, especially when he saw those familiar figures hanging on the Ferris wheel, giggling at him. When he heard the sound, Yangkang was really scared and stepped back. Suddenly, I felt something hit behind me. Looking back tremblingly, Yangkang's face suddenly turned pale, and he saw pairs of shoes hanging in the air behind him, neatly hanging in the air like salted fish. Yangkang didn't even have the courage to raise his head and take a look. He only felt that his whole body was cold and cold. A bead of sweat slid down his neck and into the collar. The moment it slid down his skin, it made his scalp numb, as if someone was poking his back with sharp nails. Hey hey hey! At this time, Yangkang suddenly heard a low sneer. He glanced sideways and was startled. He saw that the Li Si he was following was already hanging on it. 2 eyes protrude high from the sockets, and his tongue hangs out. Li Si's original appearance, even in reality, can be regarded as a good-looking young man. But at this moment, the entire face was black and purple, and the blood vessels on it were bursting. It was so ferocious that it made people feel chilled. At this time, he stared at Yangkang, and let out a sneaky and unintelligible laugh, like a murderous ghost. Yangkang's face became more and more ugly, his fists were clenched tightly, and the muscles and bones on his upper body were squirming and rattling in the air. When people are extremely fearful, they often become extremely angry. Go away. Yangkang was frightened at first, but after the fright, he became even more uncontrollable in anger. He suddenly shouted and threw his fist at the corpse. How could the cold corpse withstand his punch? His muscles and bones were suddenly beaten to pieces, and after his body was thrown into the air, he fell heavily again, floating in the air. Bang bang bang. This time, not only Li Si's body was shaking from side to side, but the other corpses were also shaking together. Densely packed corpses were shaking left and right in front of him, and Yangkang suddenly found that he seemed to be surrounded by these corpses, unable to move forward or retreat. At this moment, a hand suddenly pulled on Yangkang's shoulder. Yangkang subconsciously wanted to raise his fist and smash it, but before he could do it, he heard Su Tong's voice from behind, "It's me." Seeing Su Tong say this, he stretched out his hand and pulled him back, trying to pull him out from the door. As a result, not only did this pull fail to pull him out, he also vaguely felt that something was there. Something, pulling on his arm. Seeing this, Su Tong raised his eyebrows slightly, waved his hand, and suddenly pieces of round coins with square holes spilled out from his hand. The clattering paper money was scattered in the air, as if it was held up by an invisible force, spinning back and forth around the surrounding corpses. Before Yangkang could understand what was going on, the corpses in front of him gradually rose up again. At this time, Su Tong hurriedly pulled him back. In fact, I followed him just to see if there was a chance to kill Li Si. But I didn't expect Li Si to rush into the street and hang himself on the southeast branch first. From the perspective of profit, he decided to take the risk to save this guy Yang Kong. After all, this guy was also an official in the camp. I don't know the specific level, but it should be similar to the head of the company's security department in reality. If used well, it may be of great use. As for these copper coins, of course he prepared them carefully. Although no rooster blood was found, the cinnabar, yellow paper, incense candles and other materials were all selected from the best. I originally had the attitude of giving it a try. After all, my master made it clear that what they do in this industry is the business of living people and the friendship of dead people. Since it's a friendship between dead people, in such a spooky place, the money might come in handy. And he discovered that the paper money he made was actually recognized by the prop book as special props when he put it in it. Third-class dark money, producer Su Tong. A little sunshade is yellow on both sides, and 3 pillars of yellow incense respect the 10 directions. This is a trivial matter in the Yang world. Worshipping the underworld is the difference between yin and yang. Effect of use: it can be bribed to use by ghosts, imps, and inferior ghosts, but the specific effect depends entirely on luck. There is a certain probability that the resentment of resentful spirits and ghosts can be dispelled. Even though the Ming Chao he made casually did not exactly follow the master's instructions, it has already achieved initial results, and Su Tong was inevitably a little proud. But what he didn't know was that if Shuigui saw this, he might scold him bloody. None of the artifacts produced by the paper makers are exquisite. You made a third-rate mediocrity, do you still want me to praise you? Of course, who told Shuigui not to be here? I saw Su Tong scattering a lot of money, and the surrounding white fog actually dissipated for the most part, and the two of them could vaguely see the main road in front of them. Looking at the main road in front of them, the two of them immediately took steps to run out. But as soon as he took 2 steps, his eyes were immediately shrouded in thick white mist. Jingle! A gust of cool wind came, blowing the wind chimes hanging in the air. Su Tong's heart skipped a beat. Suddenly his legs felt numb. He lowered his head and saw that the soles of his feet were tightly wrapped by 2 ropes. Neck. The same happened to Yang Kong on the side. The rope was tied around his feet. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't break free. His legs felt numb and he couldn't even lift any strength. Seeing this, Su Tong threw a handful of paper money, but it was of no use. At this time, he suddenly felt like something was staring at him from behind. He turned around and saw a hanging rope hanging on it in the park from time to time, bright red blood drops dripped on the rope on the ground. If you look carefully, you can vaguely see the shadow of a woman hanging on it. The shadow is very shallow, and only a little outline can be seen, and the body is swaying on the hanging rope. Su Tong raised his eyes slightly and looked at the woman's shadow. Seeing that he was not afraid, he teased, "Hey, sister, you are so slutty. Why don't you follow me? I will ensure that you are well liked and drunk." Yang Kong on the side almost bit his tongue when he heard this, thinking to himself, "Why don't you want to kill me?" So he winked at Su Tong frantically, but Su Tong didn't look at him at all. The reason why he came to this place was because he noticed it was unclean last time. There are such weird places in a doomsday script, which inevitably arouses my curiosity. But last time I was in a hurry and not all of my prop cards were unlocked, and Yan Niang was in a hurry to tell her to hurry up, so she didn't have the chance to practice it. Master and master often say that they need to establish friendship with the dead. Of course, given such a rare opportunity, I must practice it. After all, practice brings out the truth. It must be boring for you to be alone here. Why don't you think about our products? I'm not boasting. We have everything you want, whether it's a muscle golden will or a small fresh meat. You can customize it. Yes, you can also choose weapons, such as mace, vajra, wulangbagwa stick, massage stick. One is not enough, how about a two-pronged approach? Our family supports dual weapon warriors. After hearing this, the woman hanging on the hanging rope finally raised her head stiffly, with a bit of confusion in her eyes. I don't know if he is confused by Su Tong's words, or is he confused about what the dual weapon warrior he mentioned looks like. After being stunned for a moment, the woman's expression suddenly became fierce. She waved her hand and swept away. Su and Tong immediately felt the ropes on their ankles tighten, and when they pulled back, they were about to pull their legs apart. The look on Su Tong's face suddenly turned unpleasant. I'm talking about friendship with you, but you actually want to harm me. He quickly took out the evil bell from the prop book and swung the bell, and bursts of ethereal ringtones began to echo around. As soon as the ghostly voice reached her ears, the woman let out a heart-rending scream. If you want to deal with the host of the source virus, you may need to use some tricks. But when it comes to dealing with dead people, I'm sorry, our family is a professional. Whizzing. Two ropes came through the air, one from the left and one from the right, trying to stop him from ringing the bell, but Su Tong had already been prepared, and only waited for the rope to be clasped in his hand before decisively launching the demon power. Light blue fire appeared on his palm and instantly ignited the rope. Now the rope around the woman's neck was also ignited. This time the woman's screams became more and more shrill. I saw white mist surging around me, and the corpses hanging on the southeast branches began to fall from the air. There was a constant banging sound in the park, and the corpses hanging high in the sky fell one by one. Like a cannon. Just when her screams became more painful, the bell on Su Tong's hand suddenly stopped, then he squatted on the ground, lit a cigar and waited slowly until the woman seemed to have recovered from the pain. Then he continued with a smile, "Let me introduce myself, I am a paper maker of the 8 classics, the kind with inheritance, a disciple of the 8 gates. It doesn't matter if you don't believe me, but you always have to give me some face. Tell me, what do you like? Let's decide what flavor it is today and I'll cook it for you another day. Brother you, what are you?" When Yankong saw this, his face was full of confusion, even more confused than the female ghost, and he urged, "We are pressed for time, or kill her, let's leave quickly." "No, I don't care who will do business for me if I kill her. If she doesn't buy it today, I won't leave. They say that doing business with the living is a friendship with the dead. Since people don't talk about relationships with me, they can only talk about business. After finally doing a practice, you can't just finish it carelessly." Su Tong's insistent attitude made Yankang's mouth muscles twitch a few times, and he thought to himself, "Good guy, is this trick of forced buying and selling something that got him into trouble?" The female ghost's eyes widened even more, and she glanced at the bell in Su Tong's hand with confused eyes. After hesitating for a moment, she nodded with difficulty. "That's right. We'll give you the highest ration. I'll add whatever you can. Pay the deposit first. I'll get ready to rush the work when I get back." After Su Tong finished speaking, he looked at the female ghost with expectant eyes and stretched out his hand. His. Looking at the hand that Su Tong handed over, the female ghost's blurred facial features were directly twisted into a mosaic. She wanted to hang this guy on the pendulum, but she couldn't withstand the intimidation of the bell in Su Tong's hand. Finally, after hesitating for a moment, she walked to the corner, reluctantly took off the small wind chime hanging on it and put it in Su Tong's hand, as if this inconspicuous little wind chime was already her entire wealth. As soon as he got the wind chime, Su Tong immediately felt a special aura surrounding the wind chime. He threw it into the prop book. After looking at the message in the prop book, he finally showed a smile on his face. "Not bad. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 145. When Su Tong left the park with Yang contentedly, the thick mist in front of his eyes actually disappeared. Looking back again, I saw a few bodies hanging sparsely on the park gate. The hanging rope was hanging on it, obviously waiting for the next prey. Without the interference of water mist, Yang quickly found Captain Jia and others. He immediately reorganized his team and found the abandoned resource vehicle. He quickly left the city and informed Captain Jia and others to avoid the city in the future. No more searches will be performed. As for the reason, Yang did not tell Captain Jia. "Brother, why don't you just kill that thing? She staying here will do us no good." On the way back, of course Su Tong didn't need to squeeze into the bus anymore, but sat happily on a big jeep with Yang. Yang couldn't help but ask why he didn't kill the female ghost. It seemed that in his opinion, Su Tong's so-called reasons for forced buying and selling were too far-fetched. But Su Tong didn't explain it to him at all. He casually called out the prop book and saw an extra prop card with a bell pattern in the prop book. 3 senses and octagonal wind chimes. The 3 awakened ones are self-conscious, aware of others, and the awakened conduct is perfect, and can gather the sound of divine beauty, which is the proof of the great awakened one. Special effect 1, gather energy to attract spirits. Hanging it in the corresponding corner of the house's entrance hall can collect the special atmosphere around it, and there is a certain probability of attracting spiritual creatures. Note, different placements have different effects. If placed in a bad location, it can easily attract evil spirits. Passive skill 1, proof of the awakened one. It's impossible to describe, please experience it yourself. This prop card is very interesting. It is rare because it has a special effect. But if you think about it carefully, this thing was originally hung in your home for decoration, and it seemed that it was placed in the wrong position, and it might cause trouble. But its passive skills cannot be described in the prop booklet, which inevitably aroused Su Tong's inner curiosity, especially wanting to feel what wonderful and indescribable things are in it. As for how to place this thing, he is not worried at all. Don't forget that there is an old man at home. As the saying goes, having an elder in a family is like having a treasure. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt very relaxed and began to think about what kind of paper man he should make for the female ghost. When the car drove out of the city intersection, Su Tong saw Gao Zhou waiting at the intersection and the body of the ranger standing behind him. After the car stopped, Gao Zhou got in the car. Huh. He looked at Gao Zhou and found that Gao Zhou was actually injured. He couldn't help but asked in confusion, "Who did you fight with?" I saw that Gao Zhou's face was very ugly, his clothes on his chest were torn, and there was a cut on his forehead, with bones clearly visible from left to right. Su Tong couldn't help but secretly wonder, if he grabbed a handful along the wound, it would be like peeling off the skin of a lychee and tearing off his scalp. "I don't know, but it should be the person sent by Song Nuanuan to kill you." Gao Zhou took out a bottle of potion from the prop book and drank it directly, casually talking about what happened last night. It turned out that not long after Su Tong left, he naturally discovered that something was wrong with the city. In professional terms, the haze shrouded the city with death and would not dissipate. In the long run, this place must be a place where no one can enter. Gao Zhou originally wanted to go in and investigate, but he didn't expect to happen to meet someone sent by Song Nuanuan. The two naturally started fighting when they disagreed. The person sent by Song Nuanuan is called Wang Yabo, and he is quite powerful. He is at least an experienced player who has gone through 5 scenarios. Gao Zhou was not as strong as him, so he suffered a hidden loss. But Wang Yabo was not much better. After all, in this strange and hazy land, Gao Zhou occupied a geographical advantage and used his strength to fight, causing Wang Yabo to be slightly injured. After the two hurriedly fought several times, they each chose to retreat. At this time, Gao Zhou was surprised to find that the water mist had actually dispersed. When he looked back in the direction of the amusement park, he saw that the haze was restrained and the fierce light had dispersed. He probably guessed that it was his masterpiece. After all, the papermaker's method of dealing with ghosts and resentful souls is quite good, and to some extent it may not be much worse than Mission Zhengzhong. So he simply stood at the intersection waiting for them, preparing to return to the camp with them. Yang Kong, who was sitting in front of the car, originally wanted to introduce the two of them, but when he saw how familiar they were with each other, he seemed to be more familiar with them than himself. When he interrupted and asked, Su Tong and Gao Zhou looked at each other and smiled, and only responded with two words. Words, old friend. He didn't even explain a single word to Yang Kong, which made Yang Kong feel confused. The car drove very fast and rushed back to the camp early the next morning. Su Tong went to the war room to pay the mission, and indeed received a supply box and a box of special military supplies healing kits. The supply box gave 100 script points, which wasn't too much, but adding the script points I drew from the pharmacist's prop book and the more than 100 points I originally had on hand, it amounted to more than 800 script points, and he was finally released. The script is divided into crises. The military healing kit is also a good thing. It contains some newly developed medical drugs. Even if the effect is not as strong as the special drugs at the exhibition, it is still a rare good thing. This military healing kit should be an extra reward. After all, the amount of supplies Captain Jia brought back this time far exceeded many people's expectations. In addition, the news that Yang Kong also found the first search team is an extra bonus. After walking out of the war room, he saw Zhang Qiang standing there waiting for him. Seeing him coming out, the little guy threw himself into Su Tong's arms with a silly smile on his face, as if he had eaten honey. Ever since he learned that he was going to join the search team, Zhang Qiang has been guarding here every day. It wasn't until I saw him coming back that I felt truly relieved. After comforting the child for a few words, Su Tong took out a handful of candies and a lot of snacks for him. Uncle, you don't know that the camp has been very uneasy every day in the past few days since you left. The special operations team has enforced martial law several times. Zhang Qiang ate a lollipop and casually talked to Su Tong about what happened in the camp these days. Su Tong listened casually. In fact, he was not very concerned about the affairs of the camp. He was more thinking about why the main mission had not started. After thinking about it, he didn't know what Yan Niang was doing when he became the Mother Queen. The appearance of the last countdown showed that the infected person must have evolved again, but now there is no movement at all for so long, which makes him very depressed. If he had known earlier, he should have left a phone number or something, and could still contact him. It was not until lunch in the cafeteria that Su Tong noticed that the number of people in the cafeteria was actually less than half. After asking carefully, I found out that the camp was conducting a closed special training during this period. It was said that Li Zhengqing had newly developed a special vaccine that could enhance the strength of ordinary people. All eligible young people in the camp participated. After all, in the end of the world, more strength means more possibility of survival. If you really become powerful and can join a special forces team, then the treatment will change drastically. While they were eating, Gao Zhou suddenly walked in from outside and sat across from the two of them with a dinner plate. He glanced at Zhang Qiang first. Seeing this, Zhang Qiang quickly stuffed the multi-grain flour pancake in his hand into his mouth and said vaguely, "I'm done eating. I'm going home to rest first." After saying that, he took the finished dinner plate and ran away in a hurry. Seeing that Zhang Qiang was so successful, Gao Zhou nodded with satisfaction and joked, "Hey, this kid is so cunning. If it weren't for the script world, I might have considered accepting him as a registered apprentice. Come on, you really have that intention, do you still care about this?" Su Tong glanced at him and rolled his eyes. Gao Zhou smiled and said nothing, stuffed the multi-grain cake into his mouth fiercely, glanced around to make sure no one noticed them, and then whispered, I feel that the main mission is coming soon. Su Tong continued to eat. Although it was multi-grain pancakes, a stack of pickles, and a bowl of noodle soup, these were rare delicacies in the apocalypse. Seeing that he didn't react much, Gao Zhou could only emphasize his tone and said, Yang Kong was taken away in a hurry as soon as he got out of the car. I saw that this guy's face didn't look good. There must be some big problem in the camp. When Gao Zhou talked about this, Su Tong couldn't help but think of Zhang Qiang's mention of martial law to the special forces several times just now. Just when he was about to mention this matter to Gao Zhou, a piercing alarm sounded suddenly. After everyone in the cafeteria heard the alarm, their expressions changed. They stood up and rushed out regardless of the unfinished food. Come on, it's a martial law alarm. Something must have happened. Upon seeing this, Gao Zhou quickly pulled Su Tong out. The two followed the crowd to the big playground. As the team stood in a row, Yang Kang's figure quickly appeared on the playground screen. He held a manuscript in his hand and sat there with an upright expression. Starting today, the camp will be under martial law. The search team's mission will be temporarily suspended. No one is allowed to go out after 17 o'clock. All production tasks will be stopped. There will be no special status personnel. All carry out defense engineering reinforcements according to deployment. Yang Kong took the manuscript and read it one by one. Immediately, everyone in the square burst into low discussion. But at this time, the screen suddenly changed. After seeing the currently playing screen, the originally noisy sounds in the square instantly became silent. Everyone couldn't help but take a deep breath. They saw a large number of evolvers in front of them, forming a huge legion and rushing towards them. There are no infected people, just a team composed of evolved people. The evolved people of different shapes look like a group of demons dancing in front of the camera. Huh! Su Tong's eyes suddenly brightened, and he actually saw an old acquaintance, and couldn't help but grin. This old acquaintance was none other than Liang Hong. I saw this guy wearing a strange bone armor and a dark black cloak. He had a paralyzed expression on his face, holding his chin in his hand, lying on a large seat, perfectly matching the paralyzed temperaments of Ni Dahong and Geu. Combined together. All it takes is a glass of 1982 red wine for him to make a perfect debut. As he was watching, the screen suddenly shook violently, and soon a big face full of tumors appeared on the screen. After a burst of weird laughter, the screen suddenly went black. At the same time as the scene ended, Su Tong and He Zhou finally received the main mission they had been thinking about. But when the two heard about the mission, the expressions on their faces suddenly became weird, because they were surprised to find that there was no mission description for this mission. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 146. Main Mission 3, Destruction and Survival. Mission Description, None. Mission Goal, Survive in the human camp for 48 hours. The main quest appears, but the strange thing is that there is no description of the quest. This is completely contrary to common sense. If there is no task description, does it mean that the task is easy and simple? Of course not. Look at the mission goal, survive for 48 hours, which means that they may encounter unprecedented trouble in the next 48 hours. Su Tong guessed word by word, whether the script space felt that their ability to survive within 48 hours was a problem, so they gave such a main task. You know that if you really want to survive for 48 hours, it won't be a problem at all. If you find a corner of the world to hide, are you afraid that you won't be able to complete the main mission? Anyone with a little bit of ability can easily complete the main mission. Then the key to the problem must be the 3 words in the camp. Su Tong rethought the entire task in his mind and came up with a new meaning. They have to survive in the camp for 48 hours, and the camp is very dangerous. The danger may not come from the pressure of the evolvers outside, but is more likely to come from inside the camp. Hey, I feel like something's wrong. Gao Zhou was not a novice either. He carefully considered all the information given after the mission and then whispered, "We will go to Yang Yan Wang later. This guy owes us a favor and must give us some useful information no matter what." When the screen went out, some soldiers had begun to urge everyone to divide into teams and prepare to divide the work and strengthen the defenses. Gao Zhou and Su Tong didn't have much reputation in the camp, so they couldn't escape from such hard work. But Gao Zhou had Yang Kang's contact information, so not long after, Yang Kang removed the two people from the list through an internal phone call and motioned for them to come to the office to find him. Gao Zhou was familiar with this road, so he didn't need soldiers to lead him and took Su Tong to find it himself. As Gao Zhou walked, he asked Su Tong, "I've been thinking recently about forming a team after I go back this time. Why don't you consider it?" In fact, the two of them are very compatible. They are both good at eating dead people. If they can cooperate on many things in a team, the effect will definitely be better than others. "No thank you." As a result, Su Tong refused without even thinking. "Why, are you still afraid that I will trick you?" Gao Zhou raised his head and looked at Su Tong, only to see that this guy had his head raised at this time, and he didn't know what he was thinking. After hearing his words, Su Tong's eyes widened, and when he thought of his good brother who was forced to become his teammate and even called him boss, he suddenly giggled. After laughing for a while, he said to Gao Zhou, "Sorry, I'm just about to form a team. Do you want to think about it?" Gao Zhou frowned and smiled but did not answer the question. Instead, he asked, "To form a team, you need at least 2 people and a silver badge. Even if you have a badge, you must have suitable teammates. Do you already have the right teammates? Have you chosen someone?" Gao Zhou naturally made his position clear by not answering, and it was obvious that he didn't want to make a fool of himself for others. The teammates' question was just a casual question to change the subject in an awkward manner, but Su Tong's eyes lit up and he nodded heavily. "My favorite teammate is a guy who likes to dance naked. One day he will join my team with a butcher knife." Gao Zhou. While the two were talking, they had already arrived in front of Yang Kang's office building. This office building was originally the fire brigade building, but now that it is no longer needed, it was planned to be included in the special operations team. In the past, when I walked here, I could see members of the special forces activities downstairs, playing basketball, or training on the playground, but today I didn't even see a member of the special forces, and even the guards were replaced. Ordinary guard. This gave Gao Zhou a bad feeling, especially since all the guards around him had unfamiliar faces. What was even more exaggerated was that these guards were actually equipped with real guns and live ammunition. Even though they were on high alert, it still made him feel very uncomfortable. After revealing their identity, the guard first made 2 internal calls and mumbled before letting the 2 of them enter the building. Gao Zhou led Su Tong through the door to the office door on the 3rd floor, and knocked on the door. "Knock on the door. Come in." Yang Kang's lazy voice came from the door. When the 2 opened the door and took a look, they saw smoke filling the office. Yang Kang was sitting on his exclusive boss chair, with his legs crossed by the window, his back facing the 2 of them. A puff of smoke came out from behind the chair. Su Tong glanced at the floor out of the corner of his eye and saw the cigarette butts on the wooden floor, some of which had not been burned out, and he suddenly had some suspicions in his mind. "Sit wherever you like." Yang Kang didn't seem to have any intention of turning around and just waved his hand for the 2 of them to sit down casually. This casualness made Gao Zhou, who was familiar with him, feel a bit in his heart. This was not the Yang Yan Wang he knew. In the past, this guy was always vigorous and resolute, and he had never seen him so depressed before. "Brother Yang, what's wrong with you?" Gao Zhou asked with concern. Yang Kong was silent for a while, then saw him casually drop the half-burned cigarette, pick up a pack from the table and put it to his mouth, raised the lighter in his hand, pressed it hard a few times and found that the lighter was out of gas. Depressedly, he threw the lighter on the table and started rummaging around, trying to find a lighter. As a result, the lighters that can be seen everywhere on weekdays seemed to be hidden today, and no matter how hard I looked for them, I couldn't find them. Click. Just when he was agitated, a hand suddenly stretched out in front of him and brought fire to his mouth. Yang Kong came forward with a cigarette in his mouth, but when he squinted and saw that it was Su Tonghao, he immediately raised his hand to cover the fire. Hiss, poof. Under the flickering light of the cigarette butt, a wisp of gray smoke came out of his mouth and nose. I should listen to you and come back early. But it's too late to talk about this now. You saw it when you came in. I can't even think of going out now. How so? Gao Zhou walked to the desk and said with a look of disbelief on his face, "You are the head of the Special Forces team, why do they put you under house arrest? Aren't they afraid that you will rebel? There are nearly 300 members of the Special Operations team. They are all warriors who have been greatly strengthened after using brain crystals. This is the highest and most powerful force in the camp. During the last Xiaochunzi incident, thanks to the timely response of the Special Forces team, which wiped out the infected as much as possible, the camp was prevented from suffering further damage. This shows the importance of the Special Forces team. In other words, Yang Kong is quite a marshal who controls a group of soldiers and horses. Moreover, the army of evolvers has already killed them, and it is far from the time for the weapons to enter Kuma and release Nanshan. Are the camp leaders stupid? Actually putting him under house arrest at this time?" In response to Gao Zhou's indignation, Yang Kong just waved his hand to signal him to quiet down. His expression looked much calmer, as if the matter had nothing to do with him. "Don't get excited, I actually agreed to this." "Did you agree?" Gao Zhou exclaimed in disbelief, once wondering if he had heard something wrong. Yang Kong waved his hand for the two of them to sit down, took out a document and placed it on the table. The two placed themselves in front of them, and when they opened it, there was a detailed report, which contained the physical examination report and mental report of all members of the Special Operations team. 60% of the members are not in good physical condition. On the surface they appear to be alive and well, but in fact most of them have internal organs failing to varying degrees, and this process is irreversible. This is still a small problem, but after investigation, it was found that 85% of the members also have major mental problems, and everyone often experiences auditory hallucinations. Some people even develop nocturnal symptoms and strong signs of aggression. Just a few days after they left, a member of the Special Forces suddenly lost his mind at night and actually killed 3 comrades in his dormitory. When people woke up early the next morning, they found that the smell of blood was strong in his dormitory. When they opened the door, they saw him sleeping alone in the bed. However, the dormitory was like a hell on earth. The intestines, liver, lungs, and head were all hung on the edge of the bed. The scene was horrific. This is the reason why special forces were under martial law before. Turning to the next page, I saw that this page contained MRI examination pictures. This team member actually has a special object in his mind. After repeated confirmation, it was determined that it was the same brain crystal as the evolver. Brain crystal. Brain crystals are actually born in human brains, which far exceeds everyone's expectations. Yang Kong pointed to his forehead and said, "Yes, it is necessary to confine the members of the special forces, because no one can guarantee whether they will suddenly go crazy like the pharmacist." Yang Kong spoke righteously. He flicked his fingers and saw the cigarette ashes being flicked on the table. After flicking his fingers a few times, he said to Su Tong and Gao Zhou, "You go back, I don't have the power to help you now." Gao Zhou wanted to say something, but as soon as he opened his mouth, Su Tong pulled him back. He glanced at the cigarette ashes on the table, seemed to understand something immediately, and pulled Gao Zhou to leave the office. In this case, we have no choice but to say goodbye. After saying that, regardless of Gao Zhou's objections, he took his arm and walked out. Hey! The matter hasn't been clarified yet, why are you dragging me away? After the two walked out of the fire brigade door, Gao Zhou couldn't help complaining. Su Tong didn't reply to him. He glanced behind him out of the corner of his eye to make sure no one was following him, and then whispered in Gao Zhou's ear, "It's no use asking, he is under surveillance, and what he said just now is all false. Why are you so sure it's fake?" Hearing this, Gao Zhou turned around and looked at him, only to see Su Tong pick up a stick and click 3 dots on the ground, draw a character 9 on the side, and finally circle the 3 dots and the character 9 with a circle. Do you know what this means? Gao Zhou stepped forward and took a look, with a confused look on his face. I saw Su Tong holding a stick, pointing at the graphics on the ground and saying, 3 o'clock rescue, it looks like the camp is going to be in big trouble. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 148. My guess was correct. The real crisis did not come from the army of evolvers from the outside, but from within. Regardless of whether the information given by Yankong is reliable or not, it is now certain that the attitude towards the special forces in the camp has formed a huge split. After all, if hundreds of well-equipped special forces suddenly lose control and strike back at a critical moment, it will definitely be a devastating blow to the camp. The camp may even be on the path to destruction. Yankong is under house arrest. Where are the other special force members? This is also a problem. Then let's rescue him at 3 o'clock. Gao Zhou frowned, feeling that things were not that simple, but we didn't receive any task prompts. Normally, given the tasks given by such plot characters, they would have a higher chance of obtaining side tasks, but for such an important matter, there is no hint at all, which is very abnormal. Yes, this is the weird part. I feel like the script is deliberately going around in circles this time. Su Tong can deeply feel the deep malice in the world of this script. The main plot is not explained, and the side tasks are not given, so they have to guess by themselves. It would be fine if they guessed right, but if they guessed wrong, the result would probably be their lives. Then shall we save it or not? Although the relationship between Gao Zhou and Yankong is not bad, if it involves their lives, Gao Zhou has to think carefully. Save. Su Tong answered without hesitation, but immediately added, but we can't come out to rescue them, otherwise they might even get us involved. He pulled Gao Zhou out and said as he walked, since Yankong wants to escape, let's just create convenience for him. It's not cost-effective to come directly to rescue him. Maybe, there is a way. Gao Zhou took a deep breath and looked at the building not far away. That's a warehouse over there. The worst we can do is set it on fire for him. Hey, don't be so aggressive. Su Tong patted him on the shoulder and told him not to be so excited. Then he pointed to the high wall being reinforced in the distance. It's too troublesome to set a fire. Just blow up that wall. Gilialu. The green liquid in the flask was bubbling like boiling hot water, and everyone's eyes were focused on Li Zhengqing. As a former leader in biochemistry in the world, he is now the most authoritative professor in the entire camp, and even has high hopes from the camp. At this time, everyone was nervously waiting for the results of his scientific research. The second dose of the super potion is not only related to the future of mankind, but also to the war that may break out in the near future. According to the news from the reconnaissance team, the army of evolvers marched at a speed far beyond people's expectations. It is not an exaggeration to say that they have pushed mountains and reclaimed seas wherever they passed. To compete with these monsters, they must have a more powerful army. And the only one who can do this is Li Zhengqing. As Li Zhengqing poured the special serum in a test tube and various strange liquids into the culture tank and mixed them, Li Qingzhen himself began to break into a cold sweat. The results of the group of people who were injected with the first dose of super potion were perfect. Human beings' physiques have undergone great changes, and some humans have even awakened supernatural powers. Unlike those members of the special forces, they evolved very cleanly and were not infected by any viruses. This eliminates the need to worry about out-of-control issues. But this alone is not enough. The second dose of super potion is the top priority. If the first dose of super potion only laid the foundation for these people, then the second dose is the towering building that begins to fully stimulate their potential. As time passed by, I saw that there was finally new movement in the cultivation tank. Gila gila. A puff of white smoke floated out from inside, and large purple plants like mushrooms actually grew inside. Sure enough, the origin of all things begins with these fungi. While Li Zhengqing was talking to himself, he quickly and carefully collected some plants for distillation and purification. Finally, I got a small bowl of liquid as clear as amethyst. Then he tried to take a straw and began to immerse the liquid into the fat drop by drop for testing. Finally, the busy days were not in vain. After the liquid was diluted, he turned around and announced to everyone, the second dose of super potion was successful. Suddenly everyone's cheers echoed in the laboratory. Song Nuanuan was the first to rush forward and gave Li Zhengqing a huge hug regardless of everyone's weird looks. This made Li Zhengqing feel uncomfortable all over, and he glanced at Wang Su, the leader of the camp next to him, guiltily. He was thinking about whether he already knew about his daughter's affairs. In the end, it was as if Wang Su didn't see it. The smile on his face made Li Zhengqing feel uncomfortable all over. After all, he was only 5 or 6 years younger than Wang Su. Since the potion is successful, we will immediately increase its production. I believe that with this super potion, the dawn of mankind will not be too far away. Until one day, we will rebuild our homeland. Wang Suzi's loud voice inspired the hearts of everyone in the room, making their faces flush like a tonic, raising their hands and shouting loudly. Professor Li, I heard that there is a third super potion, which is the final potion. We are now at a crisis point. Now that the mother strain of the second dose has been developed, the rest will be left to others. Go ahead, you have to develop the third potion as soon as possible. Wang Suzi enthusiastically took Li Zhengqing's hand and encouraged him. This. Li Zhengqing's expression changed slightly when he heard this, and he looked sideways at Song Nuanuan with a wry smile on his face, thinking that he had indeed fallen into a beauty trap. He had only told Wang Qian, name of Song Nuanuan, about the third super potion. Now that Wang Suzi knows about it, it means that Wang Suzi must know about the two of them. Li Zhengqing even couldn't help but maliciously guess that maybe Wang Qian took the initiative to approach him, an old guy in his 40s, and it was Wang Suzi's instruction. Seemingly sensing the unhappiness in Li Zhengqing's heart, Wang Suzi's fat and honest face showed an increasingly friendly smile. He took Li Zhengqing's hand and simply called him by his name this time. Zhengqing, what time has it been? Do you think I'm the kind of person who clings to the past? Heroes match beauties. Qian likes heroes like you. I don't think it's a bad thing. At this moment, Li Zhengqing's face suddenly turned red. Before the apocalypse broke out, he actually had a wife, but they all met through blind dates. He had treated this wife with respect as a guest for more than 10 years, and she seemed very affectionate to outsiders. But in his heart, he always felt that the passion he longed for was missing. Until he met Wang Qian, even though he knew that Wang Qian came with a certain purpose, he still couldn't help but be moved by her. In addition, Wang Suzi's words at this moment can be regarded as a positive agreement for them to be together. Even though Li Zhengqing was not happy in his heart, he still agreed. However, only one of the third super potion can be produced. At this time, Li Zhengqing suddenly thought of something and quickly explained, because the third super potion requires the source virus and Eva's blood. For Eva, who is still young, it is irreversible to draw so much blood at one time. Harm. At this very moment, he was willing to try, but only this time. He could not try again regardless of whether he succeeded or not. Otherwise, if something unexpected happened to Eva, it would be the biggest loss. Okay. Don't worry, Eva is also our human treasure. If we weren't at the moment of life and death, I would never allow her to do any harm to her. Wang Suzi looked at the baby girl in the incubator and spoke even more righteously. This attitude finally made Li Zhengqing feel much better. You have to speed up the progress. I'm waiting for your good news. He patted Li Zhengqing's hand and encouraged him again before leading the group out of the laboratory. Come on. Before leaving, Song Nuanuan walked up to Li Zhengqing, and when he wasn't paying attention, she gave him a passionate kiss like lightning, which made Li Zhengqing's face turn red to his ears. When she came back to her senses, Song Nuanuan had already followed Wang Suzi like a good girl and left his sight. After being stunned for a while, Li Zhengqing put his hands on his face to wipe away the lip marks. Looking at the lip marks stained on his hands, Li Zhengqing glanced at the crowd from the corner of his eye to make sure that no one was paying attention to the movement here. Quietly put the lipstick on your hand to your mouth and lick it. Yang didn't have much movement last night. Wang Suzi mentioned Yang and others while walking with everyone. No, but I felt uneasy, so I secretly added a lot of guards there. Song Nuanuan followed Wang Suzi and whispered. You still have to be careful. He is not the kind of person who just sits there and waits for death. Wang Suzi nodded and looked out the window. The sky outside was getting darker and darker. The high protective wall gave people an indestructible sense of security. What about the Special Forces team? An officer in combat uniform asked in a low voice. The Special Forces team has now become a hot potato. In the past few days since Yang left, there have been 2 or 3 out-of-control situations. They even discovered that some members of the Special Forces team secretly hid a lot of brain crystals in order to improve their strength. According to Li Zhengqing, these people can no longer go back and may become evolvers at any time. Before, the camp turned a blind eye because they had no other choice. Now they have a super potion purified from Eva and the source virus. It means that human beings have a stronger and better evolutionary route. Naturally, it is time for these emergency products to be abandoned. Wang Suzi looked very embarrassed. Take it easy for now. When this crisis passes, I will have a good talk with Yang about this matter. The others looked at each other after hearing this, always feeling that the leader's heart was too soft, and were about to persuade him again. Suddenly a dazzling bright light flashed in the distance for several times, followed by a huge roar, and a huge fire suddenly lit up the sky above the camp.